Duyabiliyor musunuz?
Diyor hocam, buyurun.
Teşekkürler. Ee, Sunumu başlatmaya çalışıyorum. Good morning again. My name is Alev İnce from Ege University Food Engineering Department. And my topic is today is forming properties of different forms of caseins. First, I will explain a little bit about the basics of forming properties, and then the different forms of caseins like native and designed forms. As you may know, foaming is the dispersed gas in a liquid or solid in a continuous phase in the presence of a surface active material, which is known as surfactants. And these surfactants, you may know, lower the surface tension, and in the ideal case, they fully cover the foam surface for an effective stability. And most commonly known surfactants are the low molecular weight ones, which are polar lipids, phospholipids, or free fatty acids. And in the second ones are the proteins, which can be taken as high molecular weight surfactants. Particularly in milk foams, proteins are the main stabilizing elements because they form a viscoelastic film around the bubbles. And third one is the particles, like micro or nanoparticles, that can be used in Pickering systems, which I will explain in the next slides. And the combination of these three systems can also be used as surfactants for foaming. And a little bit about the destabilization mechanisms about foams. The first one is the drainage, which is the liquid flow under gravity. Here is the viscosity is the most important factor because when the viscosity increases, the drainage rate decreases, and as foam ages, the shape of bubbles, as you can see here, turns more polyhedral as a result of the drainage. And the second destabilization mechanism is the coalescence, which is the combination of two bubbles to form a large one via the film rupture. The third mechanism is the disproportionation. Here, due to the pressure difference, large bubbles get larger at the expense of disappearing of the smaller ones. So there's a gas diffusion here, and the small bubbles disappearing because the pressure is high in them, and the large bubbles are getting larger. This is the third destabilization mechanism. The Pickering effect, when we say the Pickering effect, the foam, we can define Pickering effect as foam or emulsions that are physically stabilized by particles. Of course, the properties of particles here are important that are written here, like the colloidal properties, firstly, because when the steric or electrostatic interactions between the particles determines the positioning of them. So they can form a network layer, a network structure around the foam layer, and they can stabilize the foam efficiently compared to the low molecular weight surfactants. They can also form a thick interface. This is also related to the viscosity effect because the formation of thicker interface due to the viscosity increase and the drainage rate decreases. Particles can also adsorb to the interface strongly, and they have a high desorption energy. These two properties actually provides a mechanical barrier which stabilizes the foam more efficiently compared to the low molecular weight surfactants. So that's important in Pickering effect. A little bit about the structural differences about the Kazein systems that I have used in this study. The Kazeins possess a random coil structure, and they often lack secondary, tertiary, or quaternary structures. They are their physical state in micelles, so they found in micelle forms in aqueous solutions. They form large aggregates. So you can see the Kazein micelle structure, the famous picture from Dalgleish. And the sodium kazein particle, which I have made, that one, they are almost similar, only the size different. And of course, we know that the concentrations are different because the casein has a halo-like structure. So inside there is a halo. And they have all the Kazein systems are heat stable, and they have an amphiphilic nature. This amphiphilic nature makes them important as a surface active material. That's why I have choose sodium kazein systems actually. And these structurally different caseins show different functional properties as well in systems. This brings us to structure-function relationship, which depends on some extrinsic and intrinsic factors such as concentration, temperature, pH, or ionic strength, or the presence of disulfide bonds. These factors affect the aggregation or denaturation degree at the molecular level, and at the macro level, can you just bir önceki slayda geçebilir misiniz? Henüz bitmedi. And the interaction between within the proteins and particles. So it depends on the structural differences brings the functional properties, the different functional properties in the solutions. And this is the method that I have used, the preparation of solutions and dispersions. First, of course, I have prepared sodium kazein particle dispersions, which I will explain in the next slide how to prepare them. Native sodium kazein solution and kazein micelle dispersions with or without the addition of salt. We have characterized the system in terms of their viscosity, particle size, particle imaging, and then we created the foam by nitrogen sparging. We have used nitrogen because nitrogen has a low solubility in water, so it slows down the disproportionation rate by creating more uniform bubbles. And then we have evaluated the foaming properties like foam ability and foam stability, but today I will mostly explain the foam stability. This is the method that I have used in the protein particle formation in the preparation of sodium kazein particles, namely two-step emulsification method, which is a flexible, robust, and relatively new method actually. In the first step, we have used an oil phase, and in the second step, we have used an surfactant phase. Firstly, we have mixed the sodium kazein, the protein solution, and dispersed the protein solution in an oil phase, and created an water in oil emulsion. And then we have gelled those droplets here in the sodium kazein case, we have gelled them via acidification using GDL, but depending on the protein type, one can use heating, cooling, or enzymatic cross-linking. Some type of other gelation methods can be used. That's also another flexibility of the method. And then we have removed the oil by centrifuging them. And in the second case, we have washed out the remnants of oil actually. So we have used a whey protein isolate solution to remove the oil droplets from the particles. We prepared this dispersion and then centrifuged them again. We repeated this step twice and obtained oil-free particles as pellet, as wet pellet. This method is known, actually and known that it is flexible in terms of the protein source, particle size, so you can change the concentration pH, and one can modify the surface properties by adding some different bioactive polymers as well. Now results show that the particles locate at the interface. Here you can see in the picture, the particles, of course, this positioning depends on the extrinsic and intrinsic factors that I have just mentioned. One important thing is the integrity of the particles depends highly on electrostatic interactions between them or within them, because if you increase the electrostatic interactions, particles can fall apart and constitute their small fragments. So charge density becomes important here, and the coexistence of the particles and at the same time their small fragments. We observed that the foaming properties like foam ability and foam stability increases with the presence of these two particles and fragments, actually. When there is no salt in our systems, we have observed the sodium caseinate particle dispersions show the highest foam stability, almost about 3 hours. And then the native sodium caseinate solution, and then the casein micelle dispersion. Of course, this foam stability depends on some certain factors like concentration, aggregation degree, surface structure, or charge density. We try to keep the concentration of protein for all three systems same. But of course, the flexibility or the aggregation rate and the charge density of these systems are different, because sodium caseinates are, the particles are formed at pH around 4, so at their isoelectric points, and the native and casein micelles around 7. So there's a difference between them about in terms of their charge densities, and of course this affects the surface structure and their aggregation rate, so that we cannot control. But we think due to the Pickering effect, the sodium caseinate particle dispersions show the highest stability when there is no salt in the system. When we look at the systems in the presence of salt, we express the foam stability in foam half-life time, which is the time required for the foam to reach half of its initial value. When you look at the sodium caseinate particles, which is the first column, in the presence of salt and in increasing concentrations of salt, it showed a decrease actually. So sodium caseinate particle dispersions, the foam stability decreased when the salt concentration increased, which is most probably due to the extensive aggregation of the particles that the foam layer cannot support. But this situation is different in the native sodium caseinate solution that seems that did not affect it at all. For casein micelle dispersions, that is similar, the sodium caseinate particles actually. Then we can see both systems, the dispersion systems, show extensive aggregation with the increasing concentration of salt. But when we compare with the no salt case, our hypothesis of extensive aggregation is actually supported, particularly in the case of sodium caseinate particles, because when there is no salt, the stability is the highest, but the presence and the increasing concentration of salt affected and decreased the foam stability, which is due to the aggregate formation. But in the native sodium caseinate solution, the difference is here. Again, the electrostatic interactions are important, but in the opposite way compared to the sodium caseinate particles. It again forms some aggregates, maybe nano or micro forms, but these behaved like particles, small particles, and therefore stabilize the foam like in the Pickering systems. So the presence of salt actually in the sodium caseinate solution had a positive effect on the foam stability. And of course, there are some possible applications of particularly the sodium caseinate particles dispersions, because that's the most fun part in our study. Caseinates function a lot as emulsifier, surfactant, and structuring element in beverages and whipped products such as ice cream, mousses, or nougat or marshmallows. They also are used in coffee whiteners and cappuccino. The cappuccino foam, maybe you know, is some type of caseinate. The two-step emulsification method is also important because you can form a pH-sensitive protein particles that can be prepared and can be used in controlled delivery systems, maybe in pharmaceutical industry as well as food industry. And as I just said, the sodium caseinate particles can be used in acidified milk drinks because they are stable around pH 4 and can be used as a potential Pickering stabilizers. And in conclusion, we have used 3 different systems on foaming stability with the main difference of electrostatic interactions. And the aggregate formation and the extent of the aggregate formation play an important role on foam stability, we have found. The coexistence of particles and their small residues showed a synergistic effect on foaming properties. They increase the foamability and foam stability of the systems. And finally, the sodium caseinate particles behaved like colloidal particles, and especially at acidic pH values, they are stable. They have a stable integrity and can be used as a food grade Pickering stabilizer. And lastly, these are my references that I have used in my study. And with that, I would like to thank you. And if you have any questions, I would like to happy to answer them.